So can you give a great big welcome to Marina Purkiss? No microphone.
No, that's fine. Right, I'm going to try and shout really loud because these guys have silenced us. Right. So I remember when I was a kid and I had this view that the government was full of these super smart people, and they went to work in this big posh room full of green leather chairs not too far from here, and together they worked to make this country better, to improve communities, but above all to help people. But that little kid couldn't have been more wrong. Never has this country suffered at the hands of a government so disastrously incompetent, so grossly corrupt, so shamelessly self-serving, and so carelessly negligent. This government has many victims, too many to name, from the thousands that were left to die of COVID in care homes, to the poorest in society having their universal credit cut just as energy and food prices are set to soar. The list of those this government has abandoned, dismissed, ignored, well, it's just too long and frankly too depressing to go through here today. But there is one group that can no longer be left behind. They can't survive any longer. They can't take any more being ignored. And that's every single one of those poor souls that receive precisely nothing during the worst global crisis of our lifetime. 3 million of them allowed to be forgotten, ignored, sacrificed. 3 million people, tax-paying people, working people, who through no fault of their own have seen their livelihoods disintegrate, their incomes gone. And yet our government has chosen to turn their backs on them, to offer no help, at a time when they could be more desperate and more deserving of it. There's a statistic I read that's always stuck with me. In Britain, as many as 75% of adults are 2.5 paychecks away from poverty. 2.5 paychecks. From defaulting on your mortgage, from falling behind with the rents, from getting into crippling debt, from being able to put food on the table. 2.5 paychecks. Do you know how many paychecks have passed since the pandemic hit? Since that first lockdown? Forget 2.5, it's almost 20. Month after grueling month with no pay, no support, nothing. Imagine what that does to a person. Just take a moment and imagine. It's hard if you've not been there. It's even harder if you're pretty comfy in life. But you can bet it's almost impossible if you're a chancellor worth 200 million and married to the daughter of a billionaire. Yet there he is, in there somewhere, making those decisions, those life-changing decisions, with no possible grasp of the grave, grave consequences. They could have helped, they could have found a way, but they didn't. And why? Well, politics is all about choices. Our government chooses where it spends money, and it chooses where it saves money. And by God, are they quick to tell us there's no magic money tree, that they need to balance the books, that all this borrowing will need to be paid for somehow by someone. And don't they just love that household budget analogy? But have you noticed when they don't mention the money tree, or the books, or the borrowing, or the household budget? They forget to mention all this when they want to spend 250 million on a royal yacht, or spend 2.6 million on a briefing room, or waste 2.1 billion on PPE deemed useless, or, to use his term, spaff 37 billion on a failed test, trace and isolate program. Because there is a money tree. It's just not for us. It's for the rich to get richer and the divide between them and us to get even bigger. Do you know what reason our Chancellor Rishi Sunak gave for ignoring these 3 million people? For leaving them with nothing? He said he didn't want a government support scheme to be left open to abuse. He wanted to protect public money, I quote, against error, fraud and abuse. Error, fraud and abuse. This from a government that has overseen industrial scale levels of corruption and a full-on raid of the public purse. A government that enforced a policy, a VIP fast lane, to siphon off billions to their Tory cronies for overpriced, delayed and even faulty PPE. A government that handed out multi-million-pound contracts to its pals via private emails and WhatsApp. That found a way to funnel 3 times the cost of the Channel Tunnel to its private sector mates for a test and trace system that was labelled an eye-watering failure by the government's own spending watchdog. There was no error here, there was just colossal, engineered fraud and abuse. And where does that money go? That taxpayer money? The billions siphoned off to Tory cronies. Do you reckon it goes back into our society? Or do you reckon it gets squirreled away tax-free thanks to top dollar, clever accountants? For the very few, this has been an extremely good pandemic. While Tory cronies can't believe their luck nor their bank balances, the 3 millions are in despair. They've sold homes, borrowed money, racked up debts, and even taken their own lives. 28 of them now, gone. Felt like they were left with no choice because of the choices of this government. This must change now. That naive view I had as a kid that government was there to help people, well, it died a long time ago. This government needs one hell of a reminder. They are there to serve us. Their duty is to us, to protect us and our welfare. And we will do whatever it takes to make them listen.